list of what we'll be doing together today. I'm seeing the names and the counties and the people popping up in the chat. And just thank you. Thank you for showing up today. And thank you for showing up every day for our community. We know these are tough times. These are times in which, public funding is in question, in which our communities are under threat and in danger. And thank you for showing up each day. Um, as we get started, I just wanted to take a moment for us to take a collective breath together. As we breathe in and we breathe out, what we know at the St. David's Foundation is that we're in this together. So who are we? There are many friends on the line who may know a lot about the St. David's Foundation. For those who are just meeting us, who are we? We're a member of the Central Texas community. We're a grant maker. We run programs at the foundation, but we do all of this with the idea that through our investments and our action, we can advance health equity in Central Texas. This means removing barriers that keep folks from being healthy and having well-being. And we know a few things. We know we can't do this alone, and that the foundation does not have all the answers. So you see up here the three goals of our strategic plan. Our strategic plan was really guided by what we heard from community, and how we go about it is also guided by community. So we have three goals. One is around increasing access to care, one is around economic stability, and one is about community-driven change. And community-driven change really says that communities know the answers, and um, that civic health of our communities is critical to the health and well-being of our communities. And civic health is really for the St. David's Foundation about this idea that, when people are connected to each other, when people are connected to resources, and when people are connected to opportunities, they really can create the change that we want to see. So, as a human being, I've seen in my faith communities and in the schools my kids are in what it means to come together and to come together to create change. So if I'll end with a quote from a community organizer I respect. We have what we need, and connections are our greatest strength. So we're glad to be connected with you today. And our team will tell you a little bit more about this funding opportunity that is before us.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Reagan. My name is Abena Asante. I'm one of the senior program officers at the foundation, and I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with you today. Jocelyn, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joycelyn. I'm a program officer here at St. David's Foundation. It's so good to see everyone this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Next slide. All right. So I'm sure you have the big question, why this funding? Why now? And so I'm going to invite you into my living room or kitchen table, because catalyzing community change starts with building relationships, trust, and connection to do meaningful community health and well-being work. So as you enter my living room, find a seat, stand by the wall, get some coffee, tea, or water. All righty. The next two slides are on our website. The Catalyzing Community-Led Change slide is where you can go to get all the information about catalyzing community-led change. So where we have circled the download document, you have to click on that, and then you can get all the information about the call. The second slide on the funding overview is also depicted in when you download the document. So our goal for this funding opportunity is straightforward. We want to grow and strengthen and connect community-led networks across Central Texas that are working on health and well-being issues. And we also want to support resident leadership in the communities facing the greatest health challenges. So over the 3-year grant period, we are working towards 4 specific aims. We want to strengthen locally rooted networks. We want to increase the number of residents from historically marginalized communities who are trained as leaders. And we also want to advance community-driven health priorities. And finally, we are looking at building what we are calling a network of networks. How would it look like to have a connected ecosystem here in Central Texas where communities can learn from each other, align their efforts, and drive change together? And so this funding opportunity, Catalyzing Community-Led Change, fits under the Foundation's civic funding priority, civic health. And the Foundation has the 2030 vision to increase the number and strength of locally rooted networks in communities with the greatest health needs. So this funding opportunity, in summary, is going to be flexible, multi-year support, and activities must indicate that it's growing, strengthening, connecting community-led works, and is building durable resident leadership over time. This funding opportunity is not for programs or services. We are looking to build the infrastructure of locally rooted networks and also building resident leadership. And one thing that I'll add is that this funding opportunity is focused on existing networks. So if you are now going to call Paul, James, Rhonda down the street to get together, this call is not for that. This call is focused on networks that are already existing. All right, well, the next slide, it's around a funding overview about the call, and it's more pertinent to applicants who are invited from the LOI to the full application stage. Nevertheless, I'm going to share a big picture of what this call is about. So the awards are going to be one-time, flexible grants with a 36-month term. We expect to give out $10 million in this funding opportunity, roughly $3.3 million per year. And I bet you're wondering how the funding determination would be made. The actual award amount for each organization will be determined by the foundation based on the scale and scope of what you are proposing, your organization's potential for long-term impact, your current operating annual budget, and there's no fixed award amount, and we'll share more guidance on how to think about your request when we get to the application session. So during the grant term, the 3-year grant term for grantees, there are some requirements that have to be fulfilled. It's important that awardees submit annual grant reports, and it's also important that they participate in learning and evaluation conversations with the foundation. We are an evolving and learning foundation, so this is very important to us. And we also expect grantees to engage in cohort peer learning with the other grantees that were awarded funding. So we see the last piece not as a reporting requirement, but as a genuine opportunity to build the connection and strengthen the ecosystem of locally rooted networks here in Central Texas. On our next slide, okay, it's all about eligibility. What is the criteria for me to apply or for an organization to apply? Number one, you have to be a 501c3 entity, and you should have a valid determination at the time of the LOI application from the IRS. You could be a public or government entity, and you could be a faith institution. Organizations without their own nonprofit status can also apply through a fiscal sponsor. And I'll share more about fiscal sponsorship in a little bit. Another requirement is that you must operate in at least one of our 5 counties: Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Williamson, and Travis counties. And you should have an annual operating budget of at least $150,000. So the organization on the ground doing the work must have an annual operating budget of at least $150,000. And finally, you have to demonstrate a track record of resident organizing and leadership development to achieve meaningful community-driven improvements to health and well-being. So that is key. All righty. And so moving on to the next slide, which I previewed with you on fiscal sponsorships. Fiscal sponsorships allows networks, organizations, and collaboratives to receive funding with or without a 501c3 status. An established nonprofit with a 501c3 determination serves as the fiscal sponsor, receiving and managing funds on behalf of the applicant and supporting financial management, compliance, and reporting. And a key thing to remember if you're going to use a fiscal sponsor is that the award, in the event that an award is made, the grant will go directly to the fiscal sponsor, who would be the signatory of the grant agreement or contract. And then they will be responsible for disbursing those funds to the project and ensuring that required reports are submitted. And if you have any questions around what I've said, reach out to us either at questions@stdavisfoundation.org or grantsinfo@stdavisfoundation.org. Okay, with our next slide here, the key takeaway that I want you to grasp from this is that this funding opportunity is for non-partisan purposes. It's not for lobbying. So simply put, the funding opportunity is supporting civic engagement, civic health. Next slide, please. All right. So this looks like a whole bunch of dates. The call opened yesterday. Today is the webinar. But for our purpose today and for you to take note of, there are 2 very important dates. Thursday, June 11th is the deadline for the first phase of the application process, which is the letters of intent period, which Jocelyn will talk about. And then the second date that I want you to take note of is when organizations or applicants moving forward to the second stage, which is the full application stage, will be notified. And so the organizations that are invited to submit a full proposal will have a due date of July 23rd to submit their full proposal. And by October 2026, we expect funding decisions to be made. And then the grant term of 3 years begin shortly after that. Okay. So before I turn it over to Jocelyn, just to summarize a quote I heard yesterday from a podcast from a lady, Harry Han, and she goes, she's with Johns Hopkins University. This work is not just getting people to do a thing, it's getting people to become the kind of people who do what needs to be done in order to solve the collective challenges that we face. That quote epitomizes what catalyzing community-led change is. And belonging through the locally rooted networks that you develop comes before the belief in the work and changing the practices, policies, and other things. So Jocelyn, you want to go next?
Yes. Thank you, Abana. I will be talking about the letter of intent. Good morning, everyone. Again, it's so great to see the names popped up in the few minutes that we've been together. Our community here today has grown from, I think, like 20 people were in the waiting room, and now we have 315 attendees in our space, really interested in what St. David's is doing, what we are hopeful for. And I just want to say thank you for being here to be curious, to expand our collective understanding of what is possible in Central Texas through this funding opportunity, and more importantly, through what you're already doing in your communities to drive community health and well-being. You've already heard from Reagan at the top to talk about how St. David's got here and what we're seeking to do long-term in our strategic plan through community-driven change. Abana has talked about key facts and timelines, and like the scaffolding and boundaries of this call through eligibility. I'm going to dive deeper into the letter of intent, which is the first step in our two-step application process. We use a LOI to lower burden, um, in order to assess alignment, and for St. David's to really understand the landscape, all of the people and ideas and solutions of organizations and networks doing this kind of work. The LOI also respects your time to identify fit worthy. You know, there are a lot of really great ideas out there. There's a lot of work, diverse, dynamic work happening, and we want to make sure this fit in this first phase allows both us to identify that fit and for you to do so as well. Reminder that this LOI period started yesterday, but you can start submitting LOIs all the way through July 11th deadline. So the letter of intent, or LOI, is a few questions and a submission of your current organizational budget. The questions we ask in the LOI is informed by two rubric categories, as you can see: potential for impact and of and by community. It's a wide screen, and that's intentional. We are not making funding decisions at this stage. We're asking those two questions. Does your organization meet eligibility requirements? That criteria slide you saw that's also outlined in the downloadable documents on the website. So does your organization meet eligibility, and does your work align with the goals of this funding opportunity? Advancing past the LOI stage means you've cleared that bar. It does not guarantee funding. That said, we'd encourage you to think carefully before you invest the time. Ask yourself honestly, does this opportunity align with the mission, the strengths, and what your community needs right now? The LOI and full application materials are posted on our website, and we encourage you to review those now so you can plan ahead. The organizations best positioned for this funding are doing this work already. One more thing to name directly, this is one-time funding, meaning there is no guarantee that the exact opportunity will be available again in the future. We say that not to create pressure, but to be transparent about what you'll be taking on. So again, think carefully, and I like to say think full of care about using this funding to incur significant new expenses that will continue beyond the 3-year term. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to look at some of the keywords and ideas used in this call to gain some clarity. So something you'll notice in the call documents as you go over them is that we use the term network. Networks are not defined by their size or formality. It may be a neighborhood association, coalition, community organizations, a resident leadership cohort, or informal but consistent group of community members working together. What matters is that the network is of and by the community it serves. So let's take that one step deeper. So you'll see on this slide, on the left column, I always get this confused. On one side, I don't know what you see and where I am in my screen. So let's just say on one side, it says the funding is a fit. And the other side, it says the funding is not a fit. So we're really trying to get deep into this to demonstrate some of that depth that we're thinking about. So the funding is a fit. Here are 2 examples. The neighborhood association in Bastrop County that convenes residents monthly to identify shared health and well-being priorities, trains resident leaders to facilitate those meetings, and mobilizes members around local civic opportunities like voter registration. So that is a good fit. Another fit, another way to demonstrate that level of depth, resident leadership program in East Austin recruits, trains, and places community members into leadership roles within neighborhood networks and supports their ongoing participation on health and well-being. So those are examples of how fit might look and sound like. This is not a fit. This is a non-example. One is a food pantry with resident volunteers distributes groceries weekly to residents in Bastrop County. So do you see that difference? The difference of the depth of a fit and where things are limited in terms of the network and that sense of collaboration, local leadership, ongoing work of and by community. Another way to think about it, another example, a research organization conducts community health needs assessments and publishes findings, but does not support residents to set priorities or take actions on their own behalf. So again, we're looking at that level of depth. And again, this is about the infrastructure of that network. It is not about direct services. We do understand that organizations and networks may do both direct services and network building work. So we encourage you to focus your LOI response on the network building aspects of the work happening in your community. So we're going to go through a couple of more of these. Again, looking at what is the example, or I'm sorry, what are the ways the word or idea is described, and then looking at what is a good fit, what is a good example, and then what is not a good fit, what is not an example. We're going to go through a couple more of these together. So track record. Again, as we look through that potential for impact, we say a track record of resident organizing and leadership. So what is a track record? You hear my face shuffling? I'm going through these with you. Track record. A track record does not require formal documentation or evaluation data. It may include stories, examples, and evidence from the community itself. What matters is that residents are the drivers, not the beneficiaries. So let's go into that a little deeper. So again, demonstration at depth. The funding is a fit. What are some examples? An organization has facilitated a resident leadership cohort for 3 years with participants who have gone on to serve on community advisory boards, lead neighborhood meetings and organize civic engagement efforts around the community health and well-being. So in that example, there's depth over time. gone on to serve community advisory boards. Another example, a network convener that can point to specific examples of community-driven priority setting on health and well-being issues. Residents identified housing stability as a shared concern, developed a response, and aligned resources around that priority. What is a non-example? What is not a strong fit as written? An organization that is newly launching a resident leadership program and does not yet have evidence of outcomes from that work. So a key word here is newly launched, right? We want established work that we can strengthen. An organization with a long history of serving community through direct programming that describes community participation, but does not discuss any progress or growth that the residents have achieved. So something is happening in participation, but the depth is missing in terms of how are residents leading and demonstrating that through in the past and have that developed track record. A track record does not have to be long. It does have to be real. It shows us what residents have done, not only what your organization has done for them. So I'm hearkening back to that category of and by community, right? Not to and your community. So we have two more. The next idea that's pervasive in our call documents, resident organizing and leadership development. So here we have that described. Resident organizing and leadership development builds the capacity of residents to act on their own behalf. It is an ongoing investment that builds people's durable capacity within the community itself. What matters is residents are not just informed or consulted, but equipped and activated. So let's look through that. What is an example of resident organizing and leadership development? An organization that brings residents in Williamson County neighborhood to identify shared health and well-being concerns, facilitates a process for them to prioritize collective action, and supports them to organizing a response. Another example, an organization that supports residents in Caldwell County to participate in local civic processes, including voter registration drives and public comment opportunities as part of a sustained organizing effort. What is not a fit? Because it's limiting, again, in that depth. An organization that conducts community outreach and distributes information about available services, but does not support residents to identify priorities or take collective action. An organization that holds one-time community events or town halls without an ongoing structure for residents to build relationships, develop shared priorities, and take sustained action together. So again, resident organizing and leadership development is an investment. It's not an event. If residents leave your work more connected, capable, skilled, ready to lead, that is what. Okay, we're on to our last one that we'll do here. I'm seeing some questions. I haven't read through them, but I'm seeing questions come up around. Maybe it's around some of this. Welcome that. You know, these are things that we're learning alongside you and trying to make meaning. We appreciate the feedback. Community-driven. You've heard this since the top of the hour when we opened. Community-driven. Community-driven is different from community-informed or community-centered. Informing and centering still locate decision-making authority with staff or the organization. Community-driven locates the authority within residents. So what matters is who decides, not just who is consulted. So examples, an organization whose resident leaders set the agenda for network meetings, determine which health and well-being issues address the network. Let's start from the beginning. An organization whose residents set the agenda for network meetings, determine which health and well-being issues address the network will take on, and hold real decision-making authority over how resources and energy are directed. Another example, an organization has shifted its priorities over time in direct response to what the community has named as most important for their health and well-being, even when that required the organization to change course or let go of a previous strategy. What is not a fit? An organization invites residents to participate in staff-led programming and solicits feedback through surveys, but where staff retain final authority over all strategic and programmatic decisions. An organization that describes its work in response to community need, but whose core programs and outcomes have remained and is not a program model. It is a relationship between an organization and the community it serves, in which power is shared and residents have a real say. If residents could change the direction of your work, it's community driven. So these have been our best efforts to provide clarity, to create some boundaries and definitions, and to cite some examples that may better shape how you're thinking so that you can, at the very jump, determine the strongest, if this is a strong fit for you, to also ask questions if you need more clarity to discern that, and then to also begin writing your LOI in response to those two rubric categories, potential for impact and of and by community. I encourage you to talk with your team, trusted partners, maybe even your board, about what your organization and network is already doing, and if it aligns with the call, goals, keywords, and ideas. I'm going to pass it back to Abida for some final reminders of information.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for going into details about the LOI process and for giving examples of what is a fit and what is not a fit. So the next slide that you see is the Given Data portal. That is how we receive proposals from applicants for the LOI, as well as the application process. So no emails and no paper. And so the deadline again for the LOI is June the 11th by 5 p.m. So please make sure that you start uploading your documents well in advance in case there's a glitch. And if there's a glitch, feel free to give us a call, but we honor the 5 p.m. deadline. The next slide is on office hours. So it's an incredible opportunity for potential applicants to meet with our team to talk through the early thoughts of your project that you have in mind. So these office hours are not meant to are meant to help equalize access to our staff, and we have an amazing staff, and to give your team and your team members the answers to any questions that may help you in deciding whether to apply and also to understand what we are looking for. Office hours are not mandatory. They are optional. So it could be 15 to 20 minutes, one-on-one virtual with a member of our team, and you can feel free to ask any questions specific to the funding opportunity around eligibility and also the process. What office hours are not is that we wouldn't be able to review your LOI draft or help you build your proposal from the ground up. So a few practical nuggets to know before you sign up for office hours. You remember I shared the slide on our website where you could download all the documents on the Catalyzing Community-Led Change call, including the FAQs. So we ask that before you reach out to set up office hours, that you've confirmed that you meet the eligibility requirements for the funding opportunity and have viewed today's webinar before scheduling. Slots are limited and it's going to be available on a first come, first served basis. And as I said earlier, the virtual one-on-one with a member of the team is about 15 to 20 minutes. And again, this is optional and it will not influence any funding decisions made at the foundation regarding your proposal. If you're unable to do any office hours, we do have Another route, if you have a straightforward question, you could use the questions at stdavidsfoundation.org to send your question to that portal, and that portal is being manned and seen by one of our team members, and we'll circle back and give you a response shortly after that. Another thing that I would encourage you to do is to revisit the FAQ page, because we are continually compiling answers to common questions that we hear from potential applicants. And so we will be updating that. So please make sure that you revisit the FAQ from time to time. And the link to sign up for office hours will be shared in the follow-up email that we send after the end of this webinar. So the next slide is on like a preview to the application phase, which is step 2. So first you submit an LOI by June 11th, and then you are notified by June 23rd if you are moving forward to a full proposal phase. And so if you are moving forward to a full proposal phase, we are offering 4 optional application workshops spread around in our region, which will be available to only the applicants who are invited from the LOI to the full proposal stage. So June 24th is going to be virtual. June 25th would be in Caldwell County, June 26th in Eastern Williamson County, most likely Taylor, and June 27th would be in Austin Travis County in the PBS building. And so this workshop is optional and is open to all applicants that have moved from the LOI stage to the full application phase. And so look at the dates that work for you and your team. And you could take a drive to Caldwell, take a drive to Taylor, or stay in Travis County, or access the webinar that is done on June 24th on the application workshop. So we have a lot of options for applicants that are interested in taking advantage of the workshops. Next slide. All right, so that goes to Claire, right?
Yes, thank you, Abena. Thank you, Joycelyn. And thank you all to, wait, Abena, come back. We are gonna go into our Q&A portion of the webinar. And thank you for using the Q&A feature. Please continue to use that. And we will start off with some questions that were submitted during the registration process for this webinar, and hopefully that will answer some common questions that the group has. And so to get us started, Abena, would you mind speaking to the role of partnership and collaboration? Are collaborative projects viewed more favorably or more encouraged? How are they being evaluated in this funding opportunity?
All right, thank you for that question, Claire. And what I want to mention is that collaboration is a rubric category in the scoring criteria. So partnerships do matter, and we have to think about that as being part of a larger picture. We are investing in networks where residents lead, and strong networks are built on real relationships, not just formal organization ties. So collaboration is one of the 6 scored criteria that I mentioned. And so think through on who you partner with. We want to see that you are working with others in ways that actually move the work forward and not just in name only. Because sometimes I'll pick up the phone and check on the collaborative partners. So make sure that it's real work that you are doing together and you are working to reduce barriers or coordinate on shared goals. The bigger vision is a network of networks here in Central Texas where we would like to see a more connected and equipped network to advance community health and well-being with residents that are tied to some of the disparities and inequities leading this body of work.
Great, thank you. Joycelyn, could you speak a little bit more about the intent of this funding opportunity being not for direct services or programs, but greater initiatives or networks?
Sure. So that this funding is not designed for direct service delivery. It supports organizing, leadership development, and network building. So direct service organizations are not necessarily excluded from this, but we really want to focus on what will build the infrastructure of the network as well. So the network could be, and in the funding call, it talks about some examples of supported activities to advance community health priorities. That's on page 2. It talks through deepening relationships, building trust, improving coordination, expanding participation, connecting networks across communities and geographies. So a whole list of ways that it moves away from direct services and more into the activities that advance community health priorities for networks and organizations doing that.
Great, thank you. And Abena, could you clarify about the annual operating budget of $150,000? Is that a requirement for only the organization or also the fiscal sponsor?
That's an excellent question you've asked, Claire. And so the organization doing the work on the ground, which is the fiscally sponsored organization, must meet the $150,000 minimum eligibility criteria that we have. So the 150,000 is for the organization that is going to be doing the work on the ground, the fiscally sponsored organization.
Great, thank you. Joycelyn, could you please speak to the idea of a track record and organizations that have done this work elsewhere but would like to expand this type of work into the 5-county area? Does the network need to be existing, or how would expansion or new areas of this work look like? Is it eligible? Does it meet the criteria?
Expansion is, I mean, it's hard to say, like, just like, I want to read all of it. I want to know the nuance and the community and what you're talking about. So at this point in this webinar and just the general work of expansion, like that is an allowable activity. The demonstrated track record could be formal or informally demonstrated. Or let me go back to some of the things that we talked about here. All my demonstrated track record. It doesn't have to be long, is the way we talked about it. It doesn't have to be a long track record. And if this group has already met, and it is the group saying we want to expand because of these reasons, and the group of resident leaders have identified that for themselves, and that is the direction they want to go, that sound like that, yes, is allowable. And we want to hear about what has happened in the past, what has led to this moment of change, and what is going to be the future of that, and how those resident leaders have built their work to expand, and what is the need of infrastructure and connectivity in order to do
that. Thank you. And as an example of that expansion, if an organization is in Houston doing this work and wants to expand to Austin, is that eligible?
I have more questions on that. Abena, what are you thinking?
So if they are in Houston and want to expand and do this work in Austin, they must have some organizing and mobilizing going on already here in Austin. This is not for new work in our region. It's for existing work to strengthen locally rooted networks. So there may be something cooking on the stove relating to new and emergent. So we'll share more details along the line. But this call is for strengthening existing locally rooted networks and building resident leadership.
Thank you. Similar to the collaborative partnership question earlier, does this funding allow for subcontracting to other groups to extend ongoing partnerships and deepen the work?
So the funding is flexible funding. And so when a grant is made, the funding is flexible as long as it's meeting the intent of the grant purpose. And so if the grantee believes that subcontracting, doing XYZ is going to help them meet the grant purpose ethically and all that, yes.
Joycelyn, could you speak to eligible expenses kind of related to flexible funding? What types of expenses do we expect the funding to be applied towards? Are vehicles eligible or purchasing capital expenses or expanding buildings? What are eligible expenses for this type of flexible funding?
Sure. So everything you've discussed could be used in this flexible funding as long as it meets the goals of the call around, around growing, strengthening, and connecting these community-led networks. So if the community, if it is demonstrated at depth that the residents are driving the work and the community priorities around health and well-being, and the community has identified that in order to do this, we need staffing, we need these vehicles to do this, mobilizing work, then that is reasonable within the flexible funding.
Yes, and what I'll add to that is that this is a 3-year funding opportunity. And we are looking at building the infrastructure, that bridge of these locally led networks. And building resident leadership. So be thoughtful around how you use these funds to advance the community health and well-being priority that you're doing.
Thanks, y'all. We have a question. Abena, maybe you could speak to this. Are grassroots organizations considered community-driven if they provide direct services?
Great question. And so remember Jocelyn talked about community-led, and Jocelyn, if you don't mind pulling up those words again. And so it has to be community-led is different from community-driven. So residents have to be at the helm of leading this work. And the second part was if they are grassroots organizations. Claire, remind me, I just went blank.
Oh, that's okay.
It's so much, grassroots. So these terms, they're hard to quantify and qualify. And there's a story behind your work, and there's a reason you use those words. So tell us that story and share with us how you talk about the work. So even in grassroots, what we're looking for is tell us what the residents have done, not just what your organization has done. And we're looking for, even if residents are doing, if direct services are happening, how are residents organizing and being developed as leaders in order for that work to occur? who decided that that was the work that needed to happen? What is the story, the origin stories, and how it came that? How is power shared, and how are residents having a real say in the direction that those services or the organization is going in?
Thank you, Jocelyn. The question disappeared before I was able to look at it again and answer. Thank you for that response. Claire, what's the next question?
Okay, the next question is related to the post-award cohort. And it's a great question that we don't get very often. For collaboratives that are successful, will St. David's Foundation engage representatives of the lead organization as part of the grantee cohort, or will named partners also be engaged?
That's an excellent question. And so the foundation funds one organization as the lead organization. And sometimes when we do have these learning cohorts or evaluation conversations, the lead applicant may have the opportunity to bring another collaborating partner. So we don't make that decision. The lead organization makes the decision on who to bring to the learning and evaluation conversations, as well as the peer cohorts, grantee cohorts that we manage.
Thank you. And Joycelyn, for larger organizations with a statewide presence, is it important to just identify community-based org partners, or should they seek to partner in applying more formally together?
State organizations can apply if they have a genuine trusted relationship in the 5-county region. The work must be rooted in those specific communities, not just operating statewide. So, I'm getting caught up. I'm getting kind of tripped up by the word, like, should the statewide agency have a formal partnership, right? That's one of the pieces. I think you should have a strong relationship with a community partner and decide if that needs to be codified in a formal way in order to feel like you have confidence and strength and are upholding the trust between you two in order to apply for this call. I cannot say if it should be formalized and what or how. I'm saying this work should already be happening. And so, if it's already happening and you have that level of trust, do you need something more? Only you can decide if you need something more formal in order to apply for these funds. But I do know that, the trust has to be there. And we've seen demonstrated time and time again when collaborators apply, that shared understanding and that shared trust is what really is really demonstrated at the jump and throughout the grant term, if those strong relationships are there.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And what I'll offer is the work has to show that it's being done in Bastrop, Caldwell, Hayes, Travis, and Williamson counties, because we have applicants that work in other counties outside the 5 counties that I mentioned, but your proposal has to demonstrate how it's going to impact our 5-county area.
Thank you. We have some fiscal sponsorship questions. Maybe Joycelyn and Abena, y'all can jump in on this. Can an eligible 501c3 be awarded and also be a fiscal sponsor for another 501c3 and be awarded?
Yes. Simple, yes.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
And then as far as when this fiscal sponsorship agreement needs to be fully executed, is that at the time of LOI submission, or can you identify a fiscal sponsor in an LOI, but have the agreement finalized prior to application submission or award? When does that fiscal sponsorship agreement need to be finalized?
So this is a great question, and a question that we are going to answer on our Q&A, on our FAQs, so that everybody has access to it. And so thank you for the person who asked the question. We will put that question on our FAQ and then come around with a response.
Great, thank you so much. We have time for maybe one more Q&A, if anyone has any burning questions. But we will go ahead and wrap up. Please use the Q&A feature if you have questions. Thank you all for being here so much. If you have additional questions that come up throughout this process, please email questions at stdavidsfoundation.org. I'm the one who gets to answer those, and we aim to answer those quickly so you have answers and are able to work on applications and LOIs. Oh, this is a great question. I'll pause this. One last question that really brings this whole webinar home. Abena, could you please say more about what we mean by community health and well-being?
Great. And so the foundation takes an expansive view of what health means. Health is more than just going to the doctor's office. We know that 80% of the factors that influence health outcomes are non-clinical. So public health, being safe in neighborhoods, having access to food, all that civic well-being, all that is part of health.
Thank you. Yes, again, thank you all so much for your questions, your time today. If you have technical questions about the portal or passwords or fiscal sponsorship specifically, our grants management team is amazing, and they are available at grantsinfo@stdavidsfoundation.org. We will send a recording of this webinar out to this group, and also in that follow-up email will be the link to register for office hours. That is a great resource. It is not required, but we encourage you all to use it. And most importantly, thank you for the work that you do in Central Texas. It is a privilege to work alongside you all, hear about your work, learn from you, especially as it relates to civic health and community-driven change. Abena.
Yes, and so I echo the thanks, and thank you for joining us in our living room. And we hope that we'll see you at the cookout with the application for the full application. So good luck, and please take advantage of the resources we are offering through office hours and also the application workshops. And again, as Claire said, thank you so much for the great work that you do in the community, especially now. We value you, we respect you, we see you. Thank you.
All right, have a great rest of the day. Thank you all.